All right, so for the sake of the recording, good evening again. To give a little background context, Mayor LaChapelle reached out to me back in September after seeing me speak in several national forums with a variety of funders and entrepreneurship and economic mobility focused events, and said, hey, let's see how we can work together to figure out how to improve outcomes for Easthampton. And it led to Ashley and I showing up for a 4-day weekend in October and ultimately turning over a 10-page plan with about 6 pages of recommendations for jumpstarting your economy, meeting your entrepreneur community where you all are, creating pathways to the workforce for your residents, addressing issues around police and community relations, and organizational capacity building within local government and within different partnering organizations that partner, like the Chamber of Commerce and such. And so after that initial work, we were invited to participate in this local rapid recovery program with the state. With that, I'm going to start sharing my screen here. And so we're here to talk about this program and what we found so far in phase 1. This is our community presentation focused on these commercial districts, as you can see here. I don't know if you can see my cursor, kind of in the heart of the city, your downtown districts. And so we're going to get into it. The lay of the land here is, we've already done our introductions prior to starting the recording. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of the Rapid Recovery Plan program administered by the Department of Housing and Community Development of the state. We're going to really focus our time on the findings from phase 1. That's really why we're here. And on a lighter touch, we'll talk about charting a path forward for phases 2 and 3. And then, time permitting, I'm sure we're going to hang back and be here as long as you need us to be. But we're going to get into some Q&A and incorporate that into our conversations for phases 2 and 3. Everybody still with me? Excellent. I saw some muted verbal yeses. So a little bit about the program, and we have this nice cameo of Eastworks here. This is a $10 million program administered by DHCD, and the idea was to create opportunities for every community across the Commonwealth to have opportunity to participate in this rapid recovery program by tailoring plans to the unique context of your communities and recover from the effects of COVID. The idea was to focus on downtowns and town centers and commercial districts of focus. And out of 351 communities, 125 were selected to have plans developed. In addition, this program is part of the Baker-Polito Recovery Plan. And there's a website here if anybody's interested in going to the RRP website and getting access to all of the webinars and all of the tools and resources, just to kind of further poke around. All right, so here's the high-level proposed timeline that we've been working from. There's about 35 consultants working across those 125 communities across the state. And this is a phased approach. As you can see, there's a phase 1 diagnostic, which is what our community meeting is really going to focus on. Phase 2 is really where we're going to be soliciting project recommendations from you all and also different stewards of the commercial district. And then phase 3 is really focused on delivering a final plan by August 31st. Our job as plan facilitators is to help keep this process going. Also, too, we've also been selected and contracted as subject matter experts in our various areas around small business marketing and promotion, district marketing and promotion, small business technical assistance, placemaking, as well as entrepreneurial ecosystem building. And so those are different lenses through which we can work with you all in informing project development and creating this plan. And of course, this process does allow for some flexibility, because initially this program was supposed to be wrapped up by June 30th. And they extended it a few months because of the amount of, well, let's just call it a Herculean effort. So they extended it for those purposes. So this is our study area. The city wanted to make sure that they accounted for the mills in the top part of the downtown district. So we're focused on Pleasant Street. We want to make sure we covered Main Street, especially with the businesses over there, Antonio's, for example, and the others. We also wanted to account for Union Street, and we couldn't do this without including Cottage Street. So this has been our study area for pulling data. All of the data you're going to see, all of this, well, the survey data is going to extend beyond this area here, just by virtue of if you improve any part of Easthampton, you're improving all of Easthampton. So we didn't want to restrict the feedback to just the study area. But everything else you're going to see, demographically speaking, is pulled based on this area. So now let's get into findings from phase one. We're starting out with focusing on the customer base, or the situation around the market. And so you can see here, these are the numbers: population size, median age, and median income. And these are the current statistics that we've pulled from Esri Business Analyst. You can see the total city has a projected population of 16,285. The study area is about 1,000. Look at the median household income. It's comparable, $67,000, $63,000 median household income. So a fairly affluent community, both within the study area and also throughout the general community. The median age, you have I'm going to say a slightly more mature population. We're talking Gen X predominantly. Median ages comparatively 46 and 40, with about 2 people on average per household. And you can see the size of your workforce there just to kind of compare, to know what we're working with. We can see that we have a fairly educated population across the city. You can see the vast majority of folks have a master's or advanced degree or a bachelor's degree. Good number have an associate's degree. Still have a decent population. What is that, about not a third, a little under a fourth of your population has a high school diploma or GED in general. And then the same holds true with the study area. And so there's some parity between the general city and the study area by educational attainment. And this may have some implications for, like, maybe the sophistication of strategies to improve outcomes, or the kinds of jobs you may want to create may want to be matched to the level of education and training and skilled labor you have available to you. Specifically speaking to the employers and the kinds of businesses you're providing for your community. You can also see the age demographics here, which I'll give you a second to kind of process this because of the number of different data points. But I'll say this blue area here on both of them, kind of like the royal blue, is what starts with from age birth to 17. So not too many kids, but a good number of young folks in Easthampton. Over here, it looks like the biggest population set is between age 25 and 34 in the study area. And you got a good swath here spanning a number of different age groups. So green starts here from 45 to up to 85 plus. So a little more seasoned general population, but the biggest chunk in the study areas, slightly younger folks, your millennials, if you will. You can also see demographically by race and ethnicity, your population, predominantly white. I think we all are not surprised by that. But you have a decent percentage or number of people who identify as Hispanic or Latino ethnically in both the study area as well as across the entire city. This shouldn't surprise anybody. So now let's talk physical environment. This process, the commercial DNA or commercial district needs assessment method, was developed by LISC, and that's the method we're following. So you just saw the market dynamics. Now we're going into the physical environment, where we're talking the public realm, the private realm, and accessibility and visibility. And to start us out with the physical environment, or access to the physical environment, we went to MassDOT data management system for transportation. And too bad you can't really zoom in on a PowerPoint template, but we chose different data points. These green nodes here are where the state systematically captures traffic on a regular basis. And so what we have here are pre and post-pandemic traffic counts for key points. Because of our study area, and there weren't really too many locations directly within the main study area, you have Main Street west of South back in 2019. That's back out here. And so pre-pandemic, you had about 9,700 cars passing that area. And this is the annual average daily vehicular traffic. So this is the daily count. And you can see going from 2019, you dropped about 1,700 cars per day since the pandemic happened. That's what it's really showing us. And we know this because businesses were closed. People weren't coming to physical locations at the same rate. And you can see the same thing over here on Northampton Street, south of O'Neill. We dropped from 11,300 to 9,300 between before the pandemic and after the pandemic. So this is what this is telling us. Also, too, the physical environment begins to look at the conditions of things like sidewalks. And so we had to use a rubric provided by the key organizers, which is Street Sense, to evaluate the conditions of things like sidewalks and awnings and the conditions of the streets and windows and visibility into storefronts and street furniture and things of that nature. And so this first one here is the grade of the sidewalks, where the description is the rubric that we use is more than 25% of the sidewalk in the study areas pose challenges to pedestrians' experiences. And so we have on the bottom left an example of a narrow sidewalk where if you had a festival going or like culture chaos and someone with a walker or a wheelchair was trying to go down the street, that would be a bit of a challenge. And you also have, this is the picture on the right, comes from Main Street down by the salon, where you have some worn sidewalks, and there were plenty more examples. We spent about 3 weeks physically there, staying at Delaney House in Holyoke and just kind of coming back and forth, capturing pictures. So this is why we use this grade here. More than 25% had challenges, not 100%, not 75%, but more than 25%. Similarly, we had to give an evaluation for street trees and benches. And I wanted to focus on the benches here because I think there's a good contrast between this good example on the right on Cottage Street down by the end of the study area, and this example from the park over on Main Street where the roundabout is, where you have a bench that, you know, is in disrepair. The nameplate is gone. Paint is kind of worn, mostly probably from the sun and people sitting in it. But we gave it a B because for the benches and trees generally you had trees throughout the study district or study area, and you had a few more benches. You had some on Main Street as well, right before you get to the turn. We ended up giving the lighting grade a B, the public lighting grade in general, where you can see about 50% of the study area is serviced by street lighting that supports pedestrian visibility and safety. For example, here, Mill 180, at least at this part of the strip, doesn't project enough light so that if someone were walking their dog or out just having an evening stroll, they can actually have visibility. They can, you know, be seen. Whereas a little further down by Eastwork, you have very good lighting from the public side of things. Similarly, we had to evaluate wayfinding and signage. Really, signage was really limited towards like the direction to Holyoke, the direction to, you know, Easthampton Center City, as you see here on the right. And then you also had like, you know, cultural district for Cottage Street. But just in front of that, we noticed that there were like really no stop signs or who turns first, second, or third. And we just happened to capture these 4 cars moving at the same time during one of our visits. And I was a little concerned, especially if someone was walking across the street and you have a gentleman standing right here in the middle of this flat area here, which can be dangerous, but just want to lift that up. So we gave that a C. Similarly with roadbeds and crosswalks, this was much more so a function of the current condition of Union Street. But one thing that we noticed was right here where the rail trail crosses over Union Street, there's no stop signs or there's no signs or anything to indicate like slow down, because if someone was coming across on a bike, it could be hazardous. Similarly, down here where Main Street and Union comes together, this is a big area to cross. And so it could be a challenge. And so I wanted to lift up the hazardous example because you all know what the roads in general look like. Cottage Street is generally beautiful. Pleasant Street is generally fine. We know that Union Street is going to actually receive investment. So technically, it's probably beyond the scope of this study to focus on trying to enhance the road on Union Street because it's already going to be accounted for. But just taking the whole study district study area into account, we used the rubric and said, yeah, the roads are generally hazardous, and these are examples of it. Also, we began to meander to the private realm. We were able to identify from one of your reports 132 total storefronts, a little under 250,000 square feet in retail space, commercial retail space, 356,000 square feet of ground floor office space. And you can see this image here of a small segment of your retail strip on Cottage Street. On the private side of things, many of you who are here, we gave the windows a grade of A because more than 75% of storefront windows can actually be seen inside of. You actually know what the business offers when you look in the window. It's not boarded up. It's not closed with blinds. You can see, and even at night, you have a good example here. Waters Fine, I believe that's a jewelry store. So we thought that was good and supports commercial activity. Also, too, the outdoor display and dining grade, you can see here on Main Street by Silver Spoon and Antonio's and Coco's that they have furniture outdoors where you can dine, and you can see the storefronts maintain an attractive window display with limited spillover merchandise, so forth. I mean, you all can read it. You can see over here back on Cottage Street by Olivia Pearl, look inside the windows. You can get a sense of what kind of offerings they have. And of course, you can look in the windows and probably see someone practicing yoga over in breathing space yoga. So good examples. We also thought signage was fairly good, where more than 75% of the storefronts showcase their unique brand identity. So even the Chamber of Commerce, I actually like the facade and the look and feel of the Chamber of Commerce's logo. And then the Union Street Bakery and Bistro, or Bistro and Bakery, and this Amy's Place. Like, no one's confused about where you're going when you see these places more than 10 feet back. Similarly, we had to evaluate awnings. And so you have the diner here on the right, which is a good example. It looks like it's been there a while, but it's generally well maintained. That's the biggest display of an awning in your entire district. And so we wanted to showcase that. Whereas this fitness center here, I wish I can zoom in. There is an awning, but it looked like it was kind of like chewed up or hasn't been invested in a while. And you can even see that extends to the facade on the brick. And so it balanced out where about 50% of the properties had functioning awnings that had been well maintained and cleaned. Similarly, we evaluated facades. And Glory of India, another example of a very good awning, as well as good signage and branding, and it looks inviting, compared to this building that looks like it may be owned by somebody, but it's not operational. Generally, most buildings had good facades and were well maintained. There were really only two buildings in your entire study area that looked like this. The other one was it a little printing company as soon as you turn there on Union Street from Cottage?
Yes, you're right.
that was the one.
Hurry and Scurry.
Hurry and Scurry, that's the one. And, because I didn't want to put here a montage of 12 photos, it was like I had to pick one. And so I picked this one, D&D Auto Parts, because it has fantastic visibility where it is, but it's an eyesore right now. And so we use that. And even at night, we had to give you a grade here, and it looks like I forgot to put it here, but it was an A. You all have an A lighting grade, where more than 75% of the storefronts have lighting that helps illuminate sidewalks. This was very pleasant. This isn't something that historically I would have studied in my work. And it was like, who would ever thought? The actual private sector can contribute to the experience of the public sector at night and safety and so on and so forth. And this is what that looks like. I want to say that night, and this isn't a poor example, this is actually a good example. That should be good example. Sorry, Casey and Vincent, you're a good example. That's why I said more than 75%, because you can see us. All right. The biggest room in any house is the room for improvement, right? So now we turn over to the business environment, where we begin to look at things like asset mix and the small business survey that you all responded to. And I'm going to deviate from the slides because I want to show you a PDF of your tenant mix by NAICS code and SIC codes. Don't want to get too technical. When you see it, you'll know what I mean. So this is based on, these are your survey results based on 87 responses, which is one of the higher response rates throughout the state. You know, I'll tell you, when we were still trying to collect survey responses, Boston only had like 14 at one point. You all were already at 56 at that point in time. So kudos for you all being responsive to these opportunities to be heard and believing that this information is going to be meaningful. We can see that 73% of the businesses who responded said that you generated less revenue in 2020 than you did in 2019, which shows that the pandemic impacted you significantly. We can also see that there was less foot traffic, and for obvious reason, people stayed home. You can see that 58% of the businesses had less on-site customers. Well, if you were closed most of that time, of course, you had less foot traffic. And if you were doing takeout only, some people weren't going to come out, especially if they can move over to Grubhub or DoorDash or some other method of getting access to your goods and services. You can also see that 95% of you said you had declines in revenue, or you had to lay off employees, or you had to reduce your operating hours, or you're now, only 30% said you're now operating at full capacity, where 64% said because of COVID, you've reduced it. And now, of course, this is no aha. I think we all know that this has impacted us all. So this is the evidence to support that. Another thing we wanted to assess was your level of satisfaction with the commercial district that we were focused on. And it was good to see that in general, you all were generally satisfied with the condition of public spaces, streets, and sidewalks. You were very comfortable and very safe feeling as employees or company owners, and your customers were very satisfied. General conditions of your facilities, as you can see, were generally also all right. And you were very pleased with the proximity to businesses that complemented yours or gave a draw so that folks can support your business. And also access for customers and employees was also pretty good. You were satisfied with those things. One of the things that popped up was when it came to the regulatory environment, only 24% of you said that the regulatory environment posed business operational challenges or posed an obstacle to business operations. So 10% said licensing and permitting, parking 12%, which is probably the biggest challenge that we've heard even qualitatively separate from this survey since October. But the vast majority didn't really think there was too much of a problem from the government side of things. As it relates to what can be done to improve your community economically, renovating storefronts and building facades, kind of a neutral response. It looks like it was important to improve safety and cleanliness. I would imagine that's dealing with crossing certain streets or certain areas, or the perception of not being clean, where you have, I'm going to say, worn assets, worn roads, worn facilities, and things like that. Improvements in the development of public spaces and seating areas. It was somewhere between neutral and important. It was important for us to change public parking availability, and we have some ideas on that. Actually, some opportunities to create probably 10 or 15 new parking spaces is one of the ideas. Is one of the ideas that we have. Another thing that was important is improving the streetscape and the conditions of sidewalks, which is a no-brainer that's important because we know that with COVID, you're not occupying your inner spaces at the same rates that you were prior to the pandemic. And so the ice cream shop, we know, for example, forms a line outside. It's important to make sure that there's accessibility. And then like amenities for folks in public transit and bike users, it's kind of between neutral and important. But it was important to have more cultural events that brings people to your businesses, to your community, that gets to see the best of Easthampton. Generally, ideas of attracting additional businesses, it leaned towards important, but it was still kind of neutral. But we can see that more opportunities to do business with your local businesses is important. And you can see that here with more opportunities for outdoor dining and selling. So there's some ideas that we're starting to toss around that. Changes to zoning and other local regulations, even though it's neutral, you can see it leans towards not really being that important, which further is a good sign for people like Jeff and the mayor here, because it means that they're really not the impediment to your growth, which is a phenomenal insight. But we can see that implementing marketing strategies for the commercial district is important. People need to know that even though Northampton's down the road, you're just as good, if not better in certain aspects. I was talking to Casey one visit, and I was saying, I don't know why Easthampton and Holyoke, which sits right in the center of the Pioneer Valley region, why you don't position yourselves as the heart and soul of the valley, just off the strength of where you sit geographically and how you're like a hidden gem. You keep some things going. And then lastly, the creation of a district management entity wasn't really that important to people. So we know opportunities for marketing and selling outdoors, more cultural events so you can do business and celebrate your heritage, and more marketing strategies. That's what we need to spend our time on. That's how we get us back to full strength. Another one here is 61% of the businesses express interest in having some sort of assistance. Because if you make widgets, if you repair clothing, if you are a personal life coach, you may not know accounting and finance. You may not know how to transition your brick and mortar business into this interweb, if you will, and take advantage of online business. And so we can see here that shared marketing and advertising, 39%. That's amazing, because what it would allow you to do is lower your costs of doing business and practice something called cooperative economics. 18% said low-cost financing for obtaining property. That's important. Another set wants to learn how to leverage social media or sell online. Those are important opportunities to build programs that bring folks together, accelerate growth for small businesses, and let the world know you're here. At the end of the day, we want to let the world know we're here, and we want to be fulfilled in doing what we love, and we want to do good and do well. Here's another one. We saw that 63% of the businesses that responded to the survey are micro enterprises. So this is getting into the characteristics or the firmographics of who responded to the survey. And that the majority of you rent your facilities, a few own, decent mix, 20%, but roughly 20% own. We can see that it was across sectors. Retail was very well represented. Arts and entertainment and fitness was well represented. Food service and accommodation, you can see it here. And one thing that wasn't really explicit was manufacturing. So I think that lives in the other category where you see 23%. I don't know if you all have microbreweries, but small manufacturers, craft manufacturers, light industrial manufacturing falls within that 23%. And then you can also see that 63% of them reported increases in the prior years before COVID. So we know for those that experienced the decline, they were on a steady path to growth as your community continues to attract interest and folks that come from as far as Rochester, New York, just to spend time with you all and bring back, I forgot the mix that we brought back. It had like ginger and pomegranate and blackberry in it, Ash. It was on Cottage Street where we bought it. I'm looking at it in our home bar, but
Yes.
we came all the way there to buy that in the cookbook from Coco's. We had the chicken and mashed potatoes with gravy, so we said we got to support this business. And so we also received some unstructured feedback, opening up the door, indoor dining to full capacity, and removing food requirements at bars. I'm not sure to what extent the city has the jurisdiction over that. That may be a state thing, but the state hears you because they receive this information. More trash cans, too much trash. More colorful options besides the historic district. Improvements in streetscaping. Allow bars to open. People want to do business. Let's see here. Local input and pandemic response absolutely needed. Not all bars easily fit into the category. Rent relief, public parking options, more festivals, ADA awareness. Thanks for doing this. More, signage for each mill building on the bike path so that folks can find them. Temporary access to empty storefronts for artists because you all are our artistic community. So this is the kind of stuff that your community wants. Things that you all said. Addressing underground utilities and repaving Union Street. I think there's about 12 exclamation points there. Huge turnoff in current condition. I won't read all of them. More parking, add bus service on Sundays, repair the roads on Route 10, Main Street, everywhere else. Outdoor events like Food Truck Fridays. Collaboration of the 4 mill buildings and management groups. So there's some cross promotion for the Pleasant Street area. That should be a destination. When I saw that one mill had an indoor park, I was like, that's pretty cool. Lowering the speed limit. Things like cleaning up after snowstorms. It wasn't even wintertime when we did this, but cleaning up after snowstorms so folks can park and walk. They still want to support your local businesses. Better local government understanding of business needs. This is why we're doing this, and an honest willingness to improve. Now, I've worked for a mayor the last 3 years, and I've been working with your mayor for the better part of a year. Those are 2 of the brightest, most committed human beings I've ever seen in public service. They really are trying to help. When we started talking, what's interesting is Mayor LaChapelle said, listen, we understand that our Black population is only about 2 to 4%, but they matter too. Our Latino population is only about 6%, but they matter too. I want to create a city that everybody feels welcome in. She didn't have to say that. I'm not able to vote her back in, but to hear that level of authenticity and sincerity and to go out of the way to say, how do we do this? We don't have all the answers. Our community doesn't have the talent to figure out all of our problems all by ourselves. Those were important things to hear from your leadership and your community. So this is good feedback. There's a congruence between the call from the community and the efforts of your administration. So now let's talk administrative capacity. I'm just going to check the time here. We're good on time. So this is where we begin to look at, are there organizations in your community willing to champion your transformation? And so far, I think we got that covered. There's a lot of different organizations here that have been identified and spoken with since March that said, yes, we're willing to be a part of different projects and ideas and really help you all create the kind of future that you all want. And this past 18 months doesn't have to define where you go from here. And so, for example, and I don't know, Casey, I know you're on. I don't know if conversations around the programming with the LGBT Chamber of Commerce has been publicly shared yet, or some of the conversations about PVPC partnering more deeply with the city of Easthampton, or conversations after your councilman indicated he wanted to make public Wi-Fi a reality, and conversations around partnering with South Hadley. Those ideas, I don't know to what extent, and we can just kind of open it up for conversation, have those ideas been shared? And Mayor, I'll pull you in on this conversation too.
Uh-oh. Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. This is, thanks everybody for taking time out of their day and their life to do this. Around stakeholders, we have on the left-hand side, targeted stakeholder list. We are one way or the other talking actively with each one of these groups, from South Hadley Municipal Light Plan, talking about negotiating broadband fiber hoods with them in the next 3 months, working with Mass Development. Yes, I just see Bill Mueller. Riverside Industries should be on this list, absolutely. Targeted list have been ongoing conversations. And Blueprint Easthampton we're trying to use that as a vehicle to work with private owners. Williston's been a real help in just giving some insight into demographics. The Chamber of Commerce, Mo, has been rock star about, what has worked, what hasn't. And Joe and Stan McCoy, I've really leaned on, given their public service, but also the many businesses that they have started with a lot of people on this list. I mean, we're never going to say no to a stakeholder, and it broadens the conversation, and to go back, to Dr. Campbell's very kind words about my perspective on leadership and that everyone needs to rise up. If COVID taught us anything, and I think this is something we all knew kind of deep down, the world that we lived in, and the positives or the strengths, the things we loved, were always tied to a really complicated, knotty history. And I say knotty like a tree, not naughty like bad. And going forward, I just look at this work and I think of all the amazing small partnerships we just kind of find out about. My statement that says everybody matters, and it doesn't matter if you're 1% or one person or 6%. There are a lot of examples that have really come forward in the last 14 months, and that gives me a great deal of hope. What Easthampton has in skills and what makes us the place we are doesn't really have to do with the people who have boots on the ground like you and Olive and me and everyone else in the city. It has to do with this culture and feeling that has been here for hundreds of years and deserves and needs to be here hundreds of years. And the folks in front of us who will succeed us, they won't look like us no more than the folks behind us. And to be able to let go of that sort of antidote in our heads and to look at this data and just see so much potential makes me excited, and I'll tell you, makes me feel redeemed on some level in the human race. So I won't get too philosophical there. I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, Dr. Lomax Campbell and Dr. Ashley Campbell. Just an amazing partnership on so many things, and I'll button it now. Thank you, everybody, again.
No problem. Thank you, Mayor. And I'm going to just go to this agenda slide again, because I want to tell you, so we just went through the findings from phase 1. Our path forward is really phase 2 and phase 3. Phase 2 is focused on a series of webinars that began back in April, on April 8th, I want to say, and they're wrapping up this week, where we've heard from 20, how many different subject matter experts? I think there's probably like 25 subject matter experts who did 1 hour long webinars. We had a webinar as well, where we talked about different topics from streetscaping to placemaking to retail to internet marketing to entrepreneurial ecosystem building to technical assistance. And those are available on the RRP website if anybody's interested in watching them. Those are being used to generate ideas for projects. Those stewards on the prior slide are organizations and entrepreneurs that have already been identified to date as interested in collaborating on moving projects forward, using the insights from those webinars and also being able to do consultations from now through the beginning of August with those subject matter experts, including ourselves, so that we can actually go deeper answering questions around projects. The ultimate deliverable from phase 2 is a running list of possible projects where you say, this is the name of the project, this is the description of the project, this is the relative budget and timeline for the project. These are the potential partners, should this project be funded, that we'd need to engage. This is the process we would need to take at a high level, if funded, that we would then do a deeper dive to execute. And then lastly, these are the risks associated with this project. Is it high risk? Is it low risk? Is it medium risk? That's essentially what the next 2 months is going to be. Meeting with experts, talking to stewards, talking to community, and trying to generate a list of projects. And watching those webinars again. Phase 3 is really me and Ashley writing your plan based on all of the phenomenal feedback that you're providing and co-creating it with you, because once we've drafted it, we're going to send you all a full complete draft to respond to and to say, can we put this here? And can we include this? And can we take this out? And, why did we do this? Oh, can we add more clarity about that? And then we'll turn that around with the final version of the plan for your community. That's the path forward. And my understanding is that the state is trying to aggregate a variety of federal, state, regional, local, private, public funding assets with an application that you can use to apply to get these project lists funded. That's the next 3 months, June, July, August. 3 months. It's still early yet. So with that, I'm happy, elated to stop sharing the screen. So just open it up for conversation. You're more than welcome to put additional stakeholders or project ideas in the chat, because we're going to use every method of communication that you provide or take advantage of to make sure that you see yourself in this plan. The floor is open, family. And I see it's 7:30. We'll hang back for 10 to 15 minutes for you all to be able to react and converse with us.
Dr. Campbell, I don't know if Jeff or Jamie are on this call, but it would be great to hear like 2 minutes of what you and Dr. Ashley Campbell have done, how it helps inform and fuel what our planning department has been working on for really the last 3 years. I'm calling out somebody. I don't know if they're in the room, Jamie or Jeff.
So Jeff was with us earlier. He's right there. There's Jeff.
I'm here. Yep. Hi. I think what the mayor's saying is there is a lot of new information coming from this study, which is where I think there have been gaps in the planning department, which is true economic development and supporting businesses and trying to grow entrepreneurs. I think that's always been a gap. Going back to 2008, that's been identified in the master plan, is to have someone specifically devoted to economic development. So I think with this project, combined with Blueprint Easthampton and all these other efforts, I think they start to grow. And I think with the support of the chamber, I think we start to grow specific support for businesses. And that's something that's new and necessary. But things like the physical environment, and facade improvements, and especially public infrastructure, those things have been well identified. And I think it's good that I think this team coming in new finds the same things that, when we did the downtown strategic plan, those things were identified, because it helps us build the case going to the state or other sources to rebuild the infrastructure. So I think we are really, really fortunate that Union Street is funded and it's a project. I know it's an easy target for people to complain about, but it is going to be fixed up. And I think what that does is it allows us to look ahead at what's next. And I think we look hard at the mills as an area. We did the Ferry Street, road project out there to support, the most desperate property that was in need of redevelopment. And I think, we are looking at Main Street. It's obvious that area could be upgraded. And so we're in the early stages of looking at that. The stuff, it just takes a long time. So these projects will build our kind of foundational narrative towards those bigger infrastructure projects. We have 3 elementary schools that are going to be up for reuse, and we're looking really hard at that, and that information and that process will daylight again pretty soon. And I think things like wayfinding and getting people to the great places that we have, that's a project that we've already initiated, and we have some wayfinding work underway. And so it's actually really good that we have this repetitive, all these documents start to say the same thing, because it just builds our foundation and our narrative. It makes it more compelling for the state to look at Easthampton over some other communities who might be just starting that process. And so I think it's all beneficial, and this is all, good information that we need to continue to educate people and make people aware. And so I think this project has been pretty unique with the way that both Dr. Campbell's have been able to reach out to talk to stakeholders. That's extra work that we can't often do for every project, so that's helpful as well. So I think, I think what we're seeing is it's not a surprise, but it's really important that we start to document it and start to find the paths moving forward for changing stuff, making improvements.
That's right. And thank you, Jeff, for jogging a few thoughts for me as well, because I wanted to share a few of the project ideas that we've already tossed around. And I also want to speak to our next site visit. We're going to be, I think I mentioned this before the recording was going on, but we're going to be in your town the last week of June, or the last weekend of June, until the 3rd of July. And the whole purpose of us coming this time is to begin really doing a deeper dive with stakeholder meetings. So for those stakeholders you saw on the list there, who are stewards with organizational capacity or administrative capacity to help execute projects, we want to be able to spend a significant amount of time with them to say, okay, based on this data and evidence, let's start spitballing the types of projects we need to take on. Do we need retail activation? This was part of my assessment in our assessment in October. The thought was, we know about this organization out of Phoenix, Arizona, that has a technology called Close By that we may want to look at, because a person can download the app, and when they get close by to the types of businesses and the types of services that they care about, they're going to get a notification to say, hey, about 15 feet from you are these types of businesses with these types of products. That's going to help businesses. There's another organization that really advances racial equity in the cannabis space that has a model where they diversify who's allowed to invest in their businesses. Is that something that makes sense, so that you're building general community wealth, things like that. We talked about other ideas, like technical assistance being provided with the Chamber of Commerce out of a revamped facility that's going to allow for residents to have a place to work out of if they're currently home-based and need access to additional resources. And so that meeting with these stakeholders over the next few months and these subject matter experts is going to really help us figure out which ones are the most pertinent, which ones most aligned to what the feedback was from the survey. And then we'll probably do some form of another readout or some sort of community update, even if it's starting a distribution list and sending out some information to give people the opportunity to give a thumbs up or say, hey, don't forget this. Any thoughts or questions?
Dr. Campbell?
Yes, ma'am.
So with you coming back, you and the doctors Campbell, as I refer to you, coming back, if they're a stakeholder or somebody who would like to give comment, how can they get a hold of you to maybe, sit down for a half hour or so? I'd ask that. And the other is I'm looking at some of the attendees, and, something I've definitely learned in the work with the National League of Cities and the Kauffman Foundation around innovation, entrepreneurship, growing a business, that it's just, we have to take down all of the barriers that don't need to be there, that are just there for bureaucracy. And we have a great deal of control of that on the local level. But the other piece of this, and spending so much time on this, on this kind of a grant, is extremely important for the next, or I would say the concurrent challenge Easthampton faces, which is housing. And that's like a whole other hour conversation about what it takes for housing, what our barriers and challenges are to housing that is affordable across income levels, and where it should be. And I thought I saw Mike Michon on here, and he and I have gone pretty hard at the Lieutenant Governor's office about, you're talking affordable housing, and then the programs and the money aren't there to support the development. So I just wanted to mention that. I actually have to jump off, but again, thank you everybody for attending. I think everybody knows how to get a hold of me, mayor@easthamptonma.gov. I see Dr. Campbell has put his phone number and his email in there. And I again, thank you. I can't wait to continue the conversation, and hopefully next time in person. So have a good night.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for even donating an additional another additional 9 minutes to our conversation. Feel free to call me, text me, email if you have questions or want to actually be a part of project solution generation. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
See you soon.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.